When we talk about rebuilding confidence and learning to trust ourselves again, the first and most honest step is to ask, where did we lose it in the first place? Confidence does not vanish overnight. It fades slowly, piece by piece, often in moments so subtle that we hardly notice until one day we find ourselves unable to recognize the person in the mirror. It may begin with a harsh word from someone we respected, or perhaps a failure that we weren't prepared for. Sometimes it is born out of repeated comparisons of when we start believing that our life is less meaningful because it doesn't match someone else's highlight reel. And other times, it comes from disappointment in ourselves when our own actions don't meet the expectations we carried deep within. To rebuild anything, you must first look at the ruins. Not to remain there, not to mourn endlessly, but to understand. If your house collapsed, you wouldn't start laying new bricks without examining why the old foundation cracked. In the same way, rebuilding confidence begins by asking what exactly shook me. Was it the rejection that made me feel I was not good enough? Was it the criticism that made me believe my voice did not matter? Or was it simply the heavy silence of being overlooked? Until you name the wound, you cannot begin the healing. The human mind is a fragile yet extraordinary instrument. When it records failure, it doesn't only remember the event, it attaches meaning to it. I failed easily becomes I am a failure. This is where confidence is quietly stolen. That single shift in language from event to identity changes everything. And unless we pause and examine these inner narratives, we keep carrying beliefs that are not ours to carry. Rebuilding confidence, therefore, requires the courage to sit with your own story and separate what actually happened from what you have been telling yourself about it. Sometimes we lose confidence because we allowed other voices to grow louder than our own. A careless remark from a teacher, a dismissive comment from a friend, or the pressure of family expectations. All of these leave fingerprints on the way we see ourselves. Over time, those external opinions start echoing inside until they sound like our own thoughts. But they are not. To rebuild confidence, you must return to the source. Who am I when no one is watching, when no one is judging, when no one is comparing? That version of you, the raw, unfiltered self, is where confidence begins to grow again. It is also important to acknowledge that losing confidence is not a sign of weakness. It is a sign of being human. No one walks through life untouched by doubt. Even the most successful people you admire have carried moments of feeling small, inadequate, or invisible. The difference is not that they never lost confidence, but that they learned to trace back to the point of loss and ask themselves, what did I internalize that does not belong to me? What story am I repeating that limits my growth? If you can answer that, you hold the key to reclaiming yourself. Rebuilding confidence is less about adding something new and more about peeling away the lies you have believed. It is about removing the dust that has covered your light. You don't need to become someone else. You need to remember the strength you once carried. Think of a child learning to walk. They fall dozens of times, but never once do they conclude, maybe walking isn't for me. They simply get up, try again, and trust that their body will learn. Somewhere along the way, adulthood teaches us the opposite, that falling means we are not capable. But that was never the truth. Falling is part of the process. If you can remember that truth, you will begin to rebuild what you thought was lost. I want you to reflect on this. Confidence is not destroyed by failure itself. It is destroyed by the way we interpret failure. If you see it as an ending, it will paralyze you. If you see it as a beginning, it will strengthen you. And trust in yourself is the bridge between the two. To rebuild confidence, start by looking inward with compassion rather than judgment. Ask yourself, where exactly did I lose trust in my own voice? And what would it take to restore it? The answer may not come all at once, but the very act of asking shifts the balance. So if you find yourself standing in that place today, confused, doubting, uncertain, don't run away from it. Walk into it. Because in the ruins of your lost confidence lies the blueprint for something far stronger, far more unshakable than before. You don't need to deny the cracks. You need to study them. For they will show you exactly where to lay the first stone. If losing confidence often begins with a single crack in the foundation, then one of the forces that widens that crack is the voice we carry inside our own heads. Every one of us has an inner dialogue that shapes the way we see ourselves. For some, that voice is kind, encouraging, and forgiving. But for many, it is harsh, relentless, and unforgiving. It tells us we are not enough, that we don't belong. of that we will never measure up. And because it is our own voice, we believe it more easily than we believe anything else. Think about it. If a stranger told you that you are worthless, you might be able to dismiss it. But when that same statement is whispered from inside your own mind, it carries the weight of truth. This is how the inner critic becomes one of the most destructive forces in our lives. It is not always loud, sometimes it is subtle. It hides in small phrases like, "Why bother? You'll fail anyway," or "Don't even try. People will laugh." These whispers chip away at confidence far more effectively than any external critic could. But here's the paradox of the inner critic was not born with us. A child does not come into the world doubting its worth. A child learns criticism by absorbing it from the environment through words of rejection, experiences of shame, or repeated exposure to comparison. Over time, the voices of parents, teachers, peers, or society fuse together and begin speaking from within. That is why silencing the inner critic is not about fighting yourself. It is about recognizing that not every voice in your head belongs to you. Silencing does not mean pretending the voice does not exist. Denial only makes it stronger. It means listening carefully and then questioning it. When the voice says, "You are not good enough," you must pause and ask, according to whom? According to what standard? Often you will find that the voice is parroting an old belief you adopted without consent. Maybe it came from a culture that worships perfection, or a parent who projected their fears onto you, or a single failure that you mistakenly turned into a life sentence. Once you expose the origin of the inner critic, it loses much of its power. Philosophically speaking, the inner critic is nothing but an attachment to the past. It is memory replaying itself in the present moment. But life is always unfolding anew. The version of you that failed yesterday is not the same version standing here today, because you have already carried the lesson forward. The problem is that the critic refuses to acknowledge this evolution. It insists on freezing you in an outdated version of yourself. When you silence it, you are not rejecting reality. You are aligning yourself with the truth of growth, the truth that human beings are not static. And here is where psychology offers us an important insight. Thoughts alone cannot define you unless you attach belief to them. A thought is like a cloud passing through the sky. It only darkens your world if you mistake it for the sky itself. The inner critic survives because we mistake passing judgments for permanent truths. The practice of silencing is, in reality, the practice of detachment. It is learning to say, "This voice is speaking. But I do not have to obey it." The beautiful thing about challenging the inner critic is that every time you confront it, you strengthen the opposite voice, the voice of compassion, of encouragement, of self-trust. And slowly, that voice becomes louder. Confidence is not the absence of self-doubt. It is the decision to give more weight to the voice that says, "I can," than to the one that says, "I can't." Each act of defiance against the critic is a brick in the foundation of confidence. But let us be honest. Silencing the inner critic is not a one-time victory. It is a lifelong practice. There will be days when the critic returns with more force, and that is okay. Do not mistake its reappearance for failure. Instead, see it as another opportunity to exercise your strength, just as muscles grow by repeated use. Self-trust grows by repeated acts of choosing your truth over your fear. The next time you hear the critic telling you that you are not ready, remember this: no one ever feels fully ready. Growth begins in discomfort. The critic may scream at the doorway of every new opportunity, but your job is not to remove its voice completely. Your job is to walk through that doorway anyway. Because the moment you act despite the critic, you reclaim your power. So I leave you with this thought: the voice inside your head does not have the final say in who you are or what you can become. You do. Confidence begins the moment you stop confusing fear with truth. And if you can silence the critic long enough to hear your own courage, you will realize that trusting yourself is not a distant dream. It is a choice you can make in this very moment. Confidence, like any form of strength, is not rebuilt in one leap. It is not something you wake up with one morning, fully restored and shining. It grows in fragments, in moments in the small victories that we often dismiss as insignificant. Yet, those very moments are the quiet architects of trust in ourselves. If you want to stand tall again, you must first learn to walk with steady steps. And those steps are the small wins we accumulate along the way. So many people wait for a grand achievement to validate their worth, a promotion, an award, recognition from the world. But life rarely works that way. Waiting for the extraordinary keeps us paralyzed, while progress is always hiding in the ordinary. The truth is that confidence is not built when you climb the mountain. It is built each day you choose to take one step upward. The small wins matter because they create evidence. They prove to your own mind that you are capable, reliable, and worthy of trust. Without evidence, your confidence is nothing more than a fragile hope. With evidence, it becomes unshakable. Think about learning any skill, whether it is playing an instrument, mastering a language, or even learning to drive. You don't suddenly master it. You begin clumsy, uncertain, perhaps even fearful. But every small success, the first correct note, the first proper sentence, the first time you steer without panic, adds a layer of belief. With each layer, confidence grows not as a fantasy, but as a lived reality. That same principle applies to rebuilding trust in yourself. You don't restore confidence by demanding perfection. You restore it by showing up daily, by choosing consistency over intensity, and by celebrating progress, no matter how small. There is a psychological shift that happens when you acknowledge your small wins. It reframes your identity. Instead of telling yourself, I am someone who fails, you begin to say, I am someone who tries, someone who improves, someone who doesn't give up. This shift is powerful because your identity shapes your behavior. When you see yourself as capable of growth, you behave in ways that confirm that belief. And slowly, your external actions and your internal self-image begin to align. That alignment is what confidence feels like. But why do so many of us overlook small wins? Because we are conditioned to value outcomes over effort. Society glorifies the finish line, but ignores the marathon of steps that lead there. We scroll through highlight reels and forget that behind every overnight success lies years of unnoticed, uncelebrated effort. Rebuilding confidence requires breaking free from that illusion. It requires the humility to say, today I made progress, even if no one else noticed, and that is enough. In fact, it is more than enough. It is everything. Philosophically, the small win is a practice in presence. It is a reminder that life is lived moment by moment, not in distant milestones. If you cannot honor the little victories, you will never fully experience the big ones, because the habit of dismissal will follow you everywhere. A person who learns to celebrate small progress learns also to be grateful of, and gratitude itself becomes a source of confidence. Why? Because gratitude shifts your focus from what you lack to what you have already built, and that shift gives you strength to keep building. There is also a resilience born from small wins. When setbacks come, and they will, it is the memory of those victories that keeps you grounded. You remember that you have climbed before, that you have stood up before, and that you can do it again. Each small win becomes a stone in the foundation, so that even when the storm arrives, you do not collapse entirely. You may bend, but you do not break, because your foundation has been laid one intentional act at a time. Let me say this clearly: progress is rarely loud. It does not always look like triumph. Sometimes progress is simply getting out of bed when your heart is heavy. Sometimes it is saying no when you have always said yes. Sometimes it is speaking up once when silence felt safer. These are not small acts. They are revolutionary because they shift your relationship with yourself. And every time you honor these victories, you are casting a vote for the person you want to become. Confidence is nothing but the collection of those votes, accumulated until you can no longer deny your own strength. So, if you are searching for confidence, do not look too far ahead. Look at the choice you can make today. What one step, however small, can you take to honor yourself? What action can you complete that will remind you of your capability? And when you do it, don't dismiss it. Acknowledge it. Celebrate it. Because the path back to self-trust is not paved with leaps, it is paved with steps, and those steps are within your reach right now. Remember, this greatness is not built in sudden explosions of success. It is built in the quiet, steady accumulation of small wins that no one else sees. And the day you begin to honor those wins, you will realize that confidence was never a distant destination. It was always waiting in the simple of daily choices you were brave enough to make. At the heart of rebuilding confidence lies something deeper than success or failure, something stronger than praise or criticism. It is the anchoring of your trust in purpose. Without purpose, confidence becomes fragile, dependent on how others perceive you or on the outcome of your efforts. But when your confidence is grounded in who you are and what you stand for, it cannot be shaken so easily. It no longer rises and falls with circumstances. It becomes steady, resilient, and enduring. Many of us confuse confidence with arrogance or with a flawless display of strength. But confidence is not the absence of weakness, nor is it a mask of perfection. Real confidence is a quiet alignment between your values, your vision, and your actions. It is knowing that your worth does not come from applause or validation, but from living a life that feels true to you. When you operate from that space, you begin to trust yourself in a way that no external force can undermine. Think about the moments when you have felt most alive, most authentic, most grounded. They were not necessarily the moments when everything went perfectly. They were moments when you acted in harmony with what you believed was right. Perhaps you stood up for yourself when it was difficult, or you helped someone when there was nothing in it for you. Those moments carry a different kind of strength. Of that strength is purpose speaking through you. And when you allow that voice to guide your choices, confidence becomes less about proving yourself and more about expressing yourself. The challenge, of course, is that life often pulls us away from our sense of purpose. We are bombarded with expectations, family, culture, society, and sometimes even our own insecurities telling us what success should look like. If we are not careful, we begin to live lives designed by others, chasing goals that do not belong to us. In such a life, confidence will always feel out of reach, because it is not rooted in authenticity. You cannot fully trust yourself if you are walking a path that was never yours to begin with. Anchoring your trust in purpose requires asking uncomfortable but necessary questions. Who am I when all titles, labels, and achievements are stripped away? What do I truly value? What kind of person do I want to be remembered as? These questions are not easy, but the answers serve as your compass. With that compass, even in moments of uncertainty, you can move forward with conviction. You may not always know exactly where you are going, but you will know why you are moving. That why is what sustains confidence. Psychologically, purpose offers clarity. It reduces the noise of doubt and comparison. When you know your values, you are less swayed by other people's opinions. When you know your vision, you are less distracted by temporary setbacks. Purpose gives you a bigger frame in which to place your struggles. A single failure does not devastate you because you understand it as part of a larger picture. You see that the journey is not defined by one misstep, but by the direction you continue to walk. Philosophically, anchoring in purpose is about belonging to yourself. It is about realizing that your worth is not conditional. You are not valuable because of what you achieve. You are valuable because of who you are. Confidence rooted in purpose is therefore unshakable because it is not negotiable. It does not depend on whether people notice you, praise you, or approve of you. It depends only on whether you are living in alignment with your truth. Let me remind you of this: confidence is not loud. It does not always shout. Often, it is silent but firm. It is the steady assurance of someone who knows why they rise each morning, why they continue even when things are hard, why they refuse to quit even when the world is watching them stumble. This kind of confidence does not need to be announced. It simply radiates. People feel it not because of what you say, but because of the integrity with which you live. And that is why anchoring trust in purpose is the final and most powerful step in rebuilding confidence. Because at the end of the day, confidence built only on achievements can collapse when achievements fade. Confidence built only on appearance can disappear when beauty changes. Confidence built only on approval can vanish when opinions shift. But confidence built on purpose is timeless because it is rooted in something that cannot be taken away, of your values, your truth, your essence. So I ask you today, do you know what your purpose is? Not the one the world has handed to you, but the one your heart whispers when you are quiet enough to listen. Rebuilding confidence begins with small wins, yes, and with silencing the critic, yes. But lasting confidence only comes when you anchor yourself in that deeper why. Because when you know why you are here, you will stop questioning whether you are enough. You will stop begging for permission to exist. You will walk with confidence not because life is easy, but because you have chosen to live it with meaning. And that is the kind of confidence no storm can shake.